the very serious, very real, very tangible connection between al-Nusra and al-Qaeda. They are, in many ways, one and the same.
Has there been any success in getting the U.S.-approved rebels to separate from Nusra?
I think those are discussions we continue to have. It obviously remains fluid and dynamic, and that there is commingling. Some of it's intentional, some of it's not. It still remains an issue.
John, on the same issue.
Go ahead.
Thank you. Last week you were asked about the attack on an Alawite village, al-Zara. You said you didn't have specific information about who was responsible. The Ahrar al-Sham group admitted to participating in the attack. The group's spokesman told Reuters, quote, civilians were not targeted. On the contrary, factions made great effort to spare civilians and deal with prisoners humanely, end quote. RT went to the village, and the residents there described a massacre where militants killed women and children and abducted dozens of people. Why does the U.S. insist that this group, Ahrar al-Sham, should not be blacklisted along with al-Nusra?
As I said at the outset, out of Munich, the decision by the International Syria Support Group, of which Russia is a member, and a communique that Russia signed up to, agreed, and this was more than 20 nations, agreed that the only groups that would not be party to the cessation of hostilities would be those designated as terrorist organizations by the UN. And of all the groups, now let me finish before you interrupt me, all the groups of the groups that are represented in Syria fighting, the two that meet that criteria, a criteria that was agreed to by everybody in the ISSG, not just the United States, ma'am, or al-Nusra and Daesh.
Why did the U.S. fight their inclusion last week at the UN?
This was a decision made by the International Syria Support Group. Everybody agreed that al-Nusra and Daesh, because they're designated by the UN as foreign terrorist organizations, would not be party to the cessation. And so that's where we are today.
The U.S. fights at the UN not to include this.
I'm not going to get into internal deliberations one way or the other. I'm telling you, look, you're putting, I love how you do this, try to put everything on the United States. The International Syria Support Group is a international community. It represents the international community. Iran is a member. Russia is a member. Saudi Arabia. I could go on and on and on. All of them collectively made this decision. And so your question should be posed to all the members of the ISSG. Bottom line is that even Russia agreed that the only groups that would not be party to the cessation are members designated by terrorist organizations of the UN. I've said that now 3 times in response to your follow-ups. The only other thing I would say is, regardless of who was responsible for this attack, there's no excuse for killing innocent civilians. None whatsoever. The whole reason why we wanted the cessation of hostilities put in place was so that violence against innocent Syrian people would not occur. And sadly, it is still occurring. And we're working very hard. The Secretary has been working very hard to try to get it to be held more in place in more places in an enduring fashion. And one of the things I think I can assure you will be a major topic of discussion tomorrow in Vienna is exactly that. How do we get the cessation of hostilities to be observed by everyone?
Do you think this particular group cares much about the cessation of hostilities?
What we care about is the cessation of hostilities, and every member of the ISSG cares about the cessation of hostilities. And what we've said all along is we want all those who have influence over groups in Syria to use that influence in an appropriate manner to get them to abide by the cessation. So look, nobody's turning a blind eye to what happened. As I said last week, that those kinds of attacks are inexcusable.
What does the U.S. do to address what happened last week?
We are working with all the members of the ISSG, which, as I said, includes
Is the U.S.
Russia.
in touch with this?
We are working with all members of the ISSG to use the appropriate amount of influence that they have. Some of that influence is influence we have over groups in Syria to get everybody to abide by the cessation. Attacks against innocent civilians are absolutely inexcusable, no matter who they're from. Michelle.